And Unit 2, Lesson 10. So compare text in different formats. So somewhat related to what we just did, right? Because we looked at some text and we looked at pictographs, and we'll see different forms of text. So not just like straight, paragraph style passages, some timelines and different sort of ideas related to, how to present that. So the lesson today, by the time we finish it, you'll be able to determine the most effective format for presenting an idea. So just the same way when we visualize information, right? Sometimes it's better to use a graph or a pictograph or a map, picking out the best way to communicate an idea. Let's take a look at our audio. Let's take a listen to our audio.
Remember that when you compare and contrast texts, you look for ways in which they are similar or different. Sometimes, information in written texts can appear in different formats, such as tables, charts, graphs, timelines, illustrations, photographs, or maps. When you compare texts in different formats, you look for ways in which they present similar information. Ask yourself these questions. Which format is more effective in presenting ideas? For what audience or purpose was each written? Which is easier to read?
So you continue to ask yourself those same questions that we've talked about. What's the purpose of what's the reason, the purpose of the author's writing? What's the audience? All that's still in play when you're comparing different types of information. And then, like it says here, some things are better in a certain format than others. Just like we looked at pictographs or a map. Same thing may go with text. It may be better suited for a timeline, or it may make sense just to keep it in sort of a paragraph form, depending on the context and the audience and the purpose. So what we have here is talking about the White House. So first, we have a letter from Abigail Adams, and from in Washington. So November 21st, 1800. And Abigail writes, "My dear child, you must keep all this to yourself. And when asked how I like it, say that I write you the situation is beautiful, which is true. The house is made habitable, but there's not a single apartment finished. We have not the least fence, yard, or other convenience outside. And the great unfinished audience room I made a drying room of to hang up the clothes in. The principal stairs are not up and will not be this winter. 6 chambers are made comfortable. 2 are occupied by the president and Mr. Shaw. 2 lower rooms, 1 for a common parlor and 1 for a levee room. Upstairs, there's the oval room and has the crimson furniture in it. It is a very handsome room now, but when completed, it will be beautiful." So talking about completing the construction of the White House. So just, think about that. Nowadays we see pictures of it. We see this, the residence of the president. But at one time, as they were moving into it, when John Adams was president, it was unfinished. So living in that condition was quite a bit different. And DC, was a swamp, so it wasn't a particularly, nice landscape on top of that. It did improve over time. So that was a letter to her daughter from the new White House by Abigail Adams, 1800. And then from 1803, right, we see a floor plan here. The entrance hall, cross hall, the oval drawing room, and then, private dining room, and then like unfinished public audience chamber. So still, unfinished staircase, and some of the other rooms in there at that time. Things have changed, some rooms have been repurposed and whatnot. So then it says, notice that the first text is in a letter format, whereas the second is a floor plan or diagram. Both contain some similar information. So the letter and floor plan give information about the White House during different administrations. So those of John Adams, so that would have been 1800, and then by 1803, the floor plan there is when Thomas Jefferson was president. But still, at that time, right, it was still obviously unfinished 3 years later. So thinking about, what Abigail Adams is writing about and then seeing our floor plan, let's go to the quiz and see, how we can compare and contrast that information. Let's start our quiz here. And we have our letter and we have our floor plan. It says test taking tip, base your answers on information in the passages or images. Other answer choices may be accurate, but correct answers must come from what you are asked to read or interpret rather than from prior knowledge only. So, always make sure that it's, referencing the question, how you're answering it. The other thing you may encounter is you may have, not in multiple choice, but if they give you some type of selection to choose from, or like those drag and drop boxes that we do, you may have more answers, more choices than you need. So you have to be careful about how you pick and choose your answers. So for number one, how about we go to Grace, question 1.
All right. Question 1. Both the letter and the floor plan show that A, the White House today is different from the White House in the early 1800s. B, the White House was still a work in progress even after the first residents lived in it. C, many years of hard work and planning went into building the White House. And D, building and decorating costs for the original White House were higher than expected. Is it B or C?
Yeah, B as in boy. White House was still a work in progress. Now, just like the test taking tip says, right, that we could, prior knowledge would tell us, yeah, it's different from the White House. Today's White House is different than the one in the early 1800s, but we do not have that information in these two, points here, right? So we can't use that. Many years of hard work and planning went into building the White House. We can infer that, but we don't have that information. And the same thing with the last one, building and decorating costs for the original White House were higher than expected. Maybe, but again, only looking at the information we have, and that leaves B for us. B as in boy. It was still a work in progress. And obviously, right, if we look at the drawing again, the floor plan, we see unfinished public audience chamber, unfinished staircase. And the same thing, Abigail was writing to her daughter that, that things are not finished yet. So B as in boy for number 1. 2, we have 2 pieces on Rosa Parks. Sasha Gay, would you mind reading our first 2 paragraphs there about Rosa Parks?
Rosa Parks, activist. Before the day Parks refused to give up her bus seat, she has spent 12 years involved with her local NAACP chapter, local teachers, and other members of the Montgomery African American community. The summer before, Parks had attended a 10-day training session at Tennessee's Labor and Civil Rights Organizing School, the Highlander Center, where she had met an older generation of civil rights activists like Septima Clark and discussed the Supreme Court's recent decision banning separate but equal schools. In the process, Parks also became familiar with previous challenges to segregation. Another Montgomery bus boycott 50 years earlier had successfully eased some restrictions, and the bus boycott in Baton Rouge had won limited gains 2 years before. In short, Park's decision didn't come out of nowhere. Rather, she was part of a long-standing effort to create change when success was far from certain and setbacks were routine. That in no way diminished the personal courage, moral force, and historical importance of her refusal to surrender her seat. But the full story of Rosa Parks reminds us that her tremendously consequential act, along with everything that followed, depended on all the humble, frustrating work that she and others had undertaken earlier on.
Right. And
Um,
that's from Soul of a Citizen, Living with
yeah,
Conviction in Challenging Times. Paul Roget Loeb, 2010. Thinking that might be a whole book, not sure. And then we have a timeline. We have individual years here related to her life. So, Life of Rosa Parks is 1943. Parks has first run in on segregated bus when she enters from front and walks through white section to back. Driver insists she leave bus and re-enter from back door. Joins the NAACP, it's the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, works to mobilize voter registration. So 1943, a good dozen years before her more famous sort of bus protest. 1944, works at Maxwell Air Force Base and rides integrated trolley, is inspired by the experience. I've been to Maxwell Air Force Base and it was hot. It was during the summer. So yeah, she worked at Maxwell. 1945, after 3 attempts, Parks registers to vote. So in 1945, that should not be an issue, but it took her 3 attempts. So suppressing voter rights was still happening then. 1949, works at Montgomery NAACP as secretary to local president Edgar Nixon, and later as advisor to NAACP Youth Council. Parks' husband, Raymond Parks, works to help free defendants in Scottsboro case. 1950, works as part-time seamstress for a liberal white couple who encouraged her civil rights efforts. 1954, Supreme Court rules public segregation unconstitutional. Remember the Brown versus Board of Education, reversing that claim, that that ruling of separate but equal. So she receives scholarship to attend workshop for community leaders working on desegregation. So she is trying to continue to desegregate Montgomery, Alabama. And then 1955, a year later, she's arrested on December 1st for refusing to give up a seat to a white passenger on a segregated bus, fined for violating segregation laws. Montgomery Improvement Association, led by Martin Luther King Jr., formed on December 5th to protest the incident. Montgomery, Alabama bus boycott begins. So then you had the African-American population start a bus boycott after she was removed from the bus, or because of her, getting arrested for that event there in 1955. So less than a week later, things start rolling. So looking at question 2, let's go to Christiana. How about reading question 2?
Number 2. How are the passage and timeline similar in scope? B. A. Both present a clear please what's that word?
Chronological.
Chronological review of Park's life B, both highlight past importance in the civil rights movement. C, both provide information about past activity before 1955. And D, both offer perspective on the Supreme Court's 1954 decision banning separation. Is it B?
So it's C, all right? So both of these provide information about parks activities before 1950. So chronological, just so you know, right, is in order of time that it happened. So, right, we see years as they go from 1943 to 1955. That's chronological order. But we see, you know, her activities, what she was doing before, when she basically became a national icon, when she was, you know, became this figure of the movement. So yeah, so we see, you know, things that she did prior to her arrest in 1955 in the passage. And then, of course, we see with this starting in 1943, her activities leading up to her arrest on 1955. So C as in cat for number 2. And 3, same information here. Nilda, would you like to read number 3?
Yes. Which is the most accurate statement about the passage in the timeline? A, both indicate the park's 1955 arrest was not an isolated incident. B, both cover a specific period of 12 years. C, both offer opinions about Park's courage. D, both present all at the same information, but in different formats. A?
A, yeah, they both indicate that she was a feisty lady that had some run-ins with the law, you know, in 1943, you know, when she refused to, you know, enter the bus from a different door. So yeah, both of those are indicated there in the passage in the timeline, right? So A for number 3. And 4, Tracy, would you like to read question 4?
Yes. Paragraph 1 of the passage related to the timeline by a contradicting information in the first 5 years indicated in timeline, B, mentioning some civil rights activities which appear in the timeline. C, summarizing a past life. D, representing opinions about events in the timeline. The paragraph 1. Could you say about paragraph 1 again?
What, the first paragraph?
Yeah. Yeah. Could I read the answer again? D.
B, yeah, mentioning some civil rights activities which appear in the timeline, right? That's how they're related. You know, giving you a little more context in the passage by adding some, you know, names and some other events. But then we see that some of those repeated in the timeline. So that's what they both have in common. And something like this, you might see together, you know, if it was like in a biography or something, right? You might have a timeline and a passage to sort of explore some of those details a little more thoroughly. B as in boy for number 4, and that is the quiz. So 1 was B, 2 was C, 3 is A, 4 was B as in boy. Okay, move on here to the workbook. And information that appears in expository text can appear in other formats as well. So expository, like an exposition, right? Giving you details, a long passage that explains things, expository. For example, a table, picture, diagram, or timeline can give you the same information about a topic as an article, editorial, or excerpt from a book. As you compare text in different forms, consider which format is more effective in delivering a message. A table may offer a clearer presentation of information than an article, but an article may offer more of the author's thoughts, feelings, or arguments, as well as deeper understanding of the topic. So that's just what we were talking about, right? We get a lot of facts about Rosa Parks' life and the timeline, excuse me, but to further explore those and to add more context, that expository text, that paragraph form is better suited. And same thing with, like an argument. If it's a persuasive text, a table probably wouldn't be as effective as getting into some detail. And also with an expository text, we get into that idea of style and tone more, right? And theme. So those are easier to express in sort of that paragraph expository form than maybe some other forms here. So here we're looking at the moon. So 2 different types of information. And on the left are expository information. So moon mining. And for both the moon and Mars, we are going to be looking at mining water because water can be used as a propellant for spacecraft, oxygen for breathing, and water for washing. That's the Mars Society Australia president, Dr. Jonathan Clark, said. Mineral mapping by NASA has shown the moon is geologically diverse, with a range of minerals present, including those which are considered rare earth minerals. Among them are yttrium, lanthanum, and samarium. Titanium occurs in some lunar rocks at 100 times the rate as rocks on Earth. The mineral is efficient at retaining solar wind particles, such as helium and hydrogen, vital gases in construction of lunar colonies and exploration. And that's from the Sydney Morning Herald's article, Moon Mining Looks to Uncover Hidden Gems by Bridie Smith, 2013. So then, in a very simplified table, right, we have what's on the moon. And our first column is the mineral, and the second column shows the significance. So first off, helium-3, a non-radioactive nuclear fusion fuel. We've gone through some helium shortages from time to time. Like if you're trying to blow up balloons for a party or something, sometimes you can't find like some place to get helium. Lunar water. So the significance there could be split into hydrogen and oxygen for fuel cells. The next, yttrium, lanthanum, and samarium, rare earth minerals increasingly critical in the making of high-tech products. And pink, I think that's spinel or spinal, is spinel. Spinel. So my wife says, so thank you, honey. Prized as a gemstone. And so our text box says the first text is an article and the second is a table. The article offers more details, but the table is more direct and leads the reader to the information faster, right? So you have to go through a whole text to see what they're saying, but you get a little more of an argument. You can see where they might be trying to persuade you. You don't get that conveyed in a table. It's just straight information, right? So there you have, sort of comparing and contrasting that information in two sort of different forms. And then it says the article and table are written for different purposes, right? The article offers explanations and opinions. The table presents information in an easy to read format. So it's very simple. We're getting into an appeal to ethics when it comes to our text on the left, because they mention Mars Society Australian president, Dr. Jonathan Clark. So as an expert, right, there's the appeal to ethics. So let's start the workbook here. And our text and our table. And then using logic says, look at the titles of the text. The title of the article indicates additional and more complex information. The title of the table indicates that it will list and explain briefly what is on the moon. Yeah, so moon mining, right? The idea of extracting these elements or minerals and valuable materials for, like space exploration and things like that. And then the title of our table just says what's on the moon, which is, breaking down some of those same ideas, but not that we're going to mine them or not why they're important, just, their sort of value. All right, so let's look at number 1. Let's go back to Christiana. Oh, I'm sorry, let's go to Etta. How about you read number 1?
Okay. Which perspectives do the text share? A, moon mining is more cost efficient than mining on Earth. B, the moon contains minerals never found on Earth. C, much has been achieved in moon mining over the last few years. Or D, the moon contains valuable and diverse resources. C.
So D. It's just that that they contain both of those, the text and the table are saying that they contain valuable resources there. The first two you can kind of eliminate. Moon mining is more cost efficient. I doubt it's going to be easier or more cost efficient to mine on the moon than it is on Earth. The moon contains minerals never found on Earth. Now, it does say they're rare earth materials, but that means they're just in limited supply. They are found on the Earth. And so C, much has been achieved in moon mining. There's been research, but it's not really stated, what's really been advanced as a, as far as how likely this may be in the future. D as a dog there for number 1. And we have a new table and some new text requirements for public office. Grace, would you like to read our section there, number 2?
All right. Requirement for public office. The U.S. Constitution provides specific age and citizenship requirements for representatives, senators, and presidents of the United States. Article 1 focuses on the legislative branch of the government. It establishes the 2 houses of Congress, the Senate and the House of Representatives. Article 2 of the Constitution establishes the executive branch. The head of this branch is the president. Article 1, Section 2 provides these specifications. The House of Representatives will be composed of members chosen every 2nd year by the people of the states. To be a representative, a person must be at least 25 years old or a citizen of the United States for at least 7 years, and when elected, a resident of the state in which he is chosen. Article 1, Section 3 specifies that the Senate of the United States will be composed of 2 senators from each state. To be a senator, a person must be at least 30 years old, a citizen of the United States for at least 9 years, and when elected, a resident of the state in which he is chosen. The Vice President of the United States is President of the Senate but has no vote unless the Senate is equally divided and the Vice President must break the tie vote. Article 2, Section C set the age, citizenship, and residency requirement for President of the United States. These requirements are as follows. No person except a natural-born citizen or a citizen of the United States at the time of the adoption of this Constitution is eligible to be president. To hold this office, a person must be at least 35 years old and a resident within the United States for at least 14 years.
All right, and then in our table, we have the office, the minimum age, and the citizenship required. We talked a little bit about, you know, the qualifications for president that have, but we haven't got to representatives or senators. So representative, right? If you want to be a U.S. representative at the national level, the federal level, you have to be a minimum of 5 years old, and we have some fairly young representatives in their 20s in Congress. So you have to be at least 25 years old. You have to have been a U.S. citizen for at least 7 years, and a resident of state in which this should say he or she. I mean, geez, it's 2022. That should be he or she is elected at time of election. But yeah, so that's it, right? So you could be a representative, citizen for 7 years, and of course you have to reside in the state in which you are elected. That's it. Senator, so 30 years old and U.S. citizen for at least 9 years, and a resident of, same there, resident of state in which he or she is elected at time of election, 30 years old. And then, of course, the president, 35 years old. You must be a natural-born citizen and a resident within the United States for at least 14 years. So, there's the difference there, age-wise, and as far as your status as a citizen, what you are eligible for. Oddly enough, I always wonder, because of order of succession, right? We've talked about this. If vice president is next in line under the president, the next in line under that is the Speaker of the House. So, theory, how old is Biden, Nelda? He's like 500 years old. I don't know. No, he's what, 79, I think. But yeah, he meets the qualification. We'll put it that way. He like doubled the qualification. But yeah, so you could technically, as far as I know, have a president, a sitting president, because of the order of succession, who's like 27 years old and immigrated from anywhere in the world, if they are the Speaker of the House. I mean, that's highly unlikely, because that Speaker of the House is a sort of prestigious and tends to go to a veteran member of Congress. But technically, you could have a president, as far as I know. I don't think there's anything in the laws that would prevent in order of succession. So if something happened to the president, like right now, it would be Nancy Pelosi, but if something happened to Biden and then something happened to Kamala Harris, Nancy Pelosi would be the next in line. So if, God forbid, somebody like Marjorie Taylor Greene was Speaker of the House, he would be president, or Madison Cawthorn, or one of these other people. But it could be somebody that's not 35 years old, and it could be somebody that's not a naturally born citizen. So anyway, that's my little rant for today. So question 2, let's work through this together here. So make sure you read the directions, right? So label the statement P if the information is found only in the passage, right? So if it only appears up here, we'll label it P. If label the statement T if the information is only found in the table. So if the information is only down here, we put T, and then label the statement B if the information is found in both. So taking a look here, we've got 3 statements. So the first one, it says a senator must be at least 30 years old. Where do we find that information?
In the passage and on the table.
It's in both. Right? Yeah, so we see it right there on the table. It's up here somewhere, senators, yeah. So 30 years old, and that's third paragraph. So B as in boy for that one. And then the next one says there are 2 senators from each state.
Passage.
Passage only, right? Yeah, that does not say that on the table, only the passage. So P as in Paul for that one. And then the final one, representatives are elected for 2-year terms.
Passage.
Passage.
Also, only the passage. So, and here's another one of those examples of test taking skills, right? We didn't use T at all. There wasn't anything in just the table. So sometimes they'll throw an answer at you that you may not use. And you'll get kind of stressed out. It's like, oh God, maybe one of these are supposed to be T. But, you know, use your instincts and, you know, make sure you check your answers. That might be the case where you don't actually use all the answers available. So B for the first statement, P for the next 2. BPP. Okay. And same passage, same table, and fill in the blank. So according to the information in the passage and table, a 27-year-old lifelong resident of Idaho would be eligible to hold the office of U.S.
House of Representative.
Yeah. So I think we just put representative, U.S. representative, REPRESENTATIVE. I want to check my spelling. Yep. And would hold the office for
2 years.
2
8 years.
years. Yeah. So those representatives are only there for 2
Mhm.
years. So like AOC and like I mentioned, Nancy Pelosi, all of those people, you know, they serve multiple terms because they get reelected, but their terms are only for 2 years. So representative for the first blank and 2 for the second blank. All right. Oh, now we got Thomas Jefferson's garden. Let's go with Tracy. Would you like to read on Thomas Jefferson's garden for us?
Yes. Thomas Jefferson Gardens. Thomas Jefferson is considered a Renaissance man in the early days of this country. Best known as the author of the Declaration of Independence, the first Secretary of State, and the third President of the United States. Jefferson was also a lawyer, statesman, architect, and scientist, among other things. And as if they were not enough, Jefferson was a wheat gardener as well. Anyone who visited Virginia plantation, Monticello, can still see today how much Jefferson enjoyed growing fruits, vegetables, and herbs for his own kitchen. To Jefferson, his garden was a laboratory in which he could grow various plant species from around the world, and many of which were uncommon and considered exotic in the United States at that time. Tomatoes, chickpeas, and eggplant were quite unusual in the 2500s. For Jefferson, gardening was a passion, and he shared seeds and cutting for those species with friends and neighbors, believe that the greatest service which can be rendered any country is to add a useful plant to its culture. In his garden note, Jefferson provided precise information about his experiments. Jefferson described how he planted each species, how he spaced them out. When the plants came, the flower or bore fruit. Of course, not everything that Jefferson tried to grow in his garden proved useful or successful. In fact, he met with significant failure in his trials. From his garden book, he learned of pests, disease, drought, and poor soil. For example, we are told that his hosper bees were killed by frost October 23rd, and that his windsor beans were killed by birds and August 21. However, one thing is also certain from his garden notes. He never let him failures stop him from continue to plant, grow, and experiment. According to Jefferson, the failure of one thing is repaid by the success of another. If one plant is 100 success, 100 successes, he believed it well worth the endeavor.
Okay. Yeah, and referring to a Renaissance man, that's an idea that comes from the Renaissance. The artists and the sculptors of that day were multi-talented. Somebody like Leonardo da Vinci, who designed and created machines and sculpted and painted. So that idea of was kind of a modern Renaissance man. Thomas Jefferson was trained as a lawyer, and of course he was a prolific writer, statesman, right? He was president, he was a diplomat, all of that stuff. Architect, he designed Monticello and a lot of University of Virginia, where basically Monticello is located close by. And the scientist, I mean, the gardening kind of shows his inquisitive mind and sort of these experimentation that he did. And that's what we get here is thinking about some of what he grew. It's hard to believe that tomatoes at one point was a rare vegetable to be found, or fruit, in the U.S. But then what we have are his notes, right? So back to the idea of the lesson here, text in different formats. And we have his gardening notes here. So Shadwell, in 1766, March 30th, purple hyacinth begins to bloom. And of course, this is well before the Revolution, right? This is years before the American Revolution, and he kind of switched his trades. So purple hyacinth begins to bloom April 6th. Narcissus and puccoon open. Puccoon flowers fallen. By March 16th, bluish colored funnel formed in low grounds in bloom. April 30th, April 6th, 13th, 16th. Yeah, April 30th, purple flag blooms. Hyacinth and narcissus grow. Gone. May 4th, wild honeysuckle in our woods open. Also the dwarf flag and violets. May 7th, blue flower and low grounds vanish. May 11th, the purple flag, dwarf flag, violet, and wild honeysuckle still in bloom. Went journey to Maryland, Pennsylvania, New York. So observation C. So he's traveling, right? After May 11th, he's going to these different places in 1766. 1774, May 4th, Blue Ridge of mountains covered with snow. So a late snow there in Virginia. May 5th, A frost which destroyed almost everything. It killed the wheat, rye, corn, many tobacco plants, and even large saplings. The leaves of the trees were entirely killed. All the shoots of vines. At Monticello, near half the fruit of every kind was killed. And before this, no instance had ever occurred of any fruit killed here by the frost. In all other places in the neighborhood, the destruction of fruit was total. This frost was general and equally destructive through the whole country. So that late freeze, right, destroying vegetables, fruits and vegetables, plants. The 14th, cherries are ripe. The 16th, first dish of peas. 26th, a second patch of peas come to table. June 4th, Windsor beans come to table. June 5th, the third and fourth patch of peas come to table. And by come to table, right, their harvest. And then the 13th, the fifth patch of peas. So that would be considered a primary source because this is from his garden book, right? These are notes that Thomas Jefferson himself have taken. So it's the closest thing. If you want to know about Thomas Jefferson's garden, you would go to his writing at that time in his manuscripts. So looking at our first question there for Thomas Jefferson, question number 4. Let's go to Christiana. Read question 4.
Number 4, okay. The first paragraph of the article support the author's view on Jefferson by A, nothing, I don't know, okay. Nothing Jefferson's talents and abilities, but B, explain the experimental nature of Jefferson's garden. C, clarifying Jefferson's motives for garden. D, supporting the idea that garden can be difficult. This A.
Yeah, it kind of lists, it calls him a Renaissance man. It talks about his different professions and everything. So yeah, it's known sort of talents and abilities. He was well versed in many things there. So A for number 4. And number 5, Nilda, would you like to read question 5?
Yes. In paragraph 3, the author quotes Jefferson in order to A, enter into with an, how do you say that word? Anecdote.
Anecdote.
B, bring Jefferson to life for readers. C, illustrate instances of failure. D, prove Jefferson optimism. B.
So this one's C, illustrate his failures. So paragraph 3, if we were to go back and take a quick look, yeah, so it talks about, the things that were killed by frost, and it's quoting him, his garden useful or successful. Yeah, and then right there at the end, for example, we are told that his Hotspur peas were killed by frost, and that his Windsor beans were killed by bug. So pointing out that he experienced failures in his garden. 5 is C. Number 6. Sasha A, would you like to read number 6?
Which statement best suggests that the garden notes are journal entries? A, the writer breaks grammar and punctuation rules and lists entries by date. B, the writer organizes ideas by order of importance and highlights ideas of special interest. C, the writer writes only of subjects of interest or consequence to himself. D, the writer breaks off his observations when he must travel away from home. Is it D?
It's A. Yeah. The writer breaks grammar and punctuation rules. So, you think about when you're taking notes at, home or just for your use, you may break a lot of those, sort of language conventions and grammar conventions, especially if you're writing in a hurry. So, you develop your own sort of type of shorthand. And here, yeah, we see a lot of stuff that's not capitalized. Certain things aren't complete sentences, all of that. And it was just for his personal use. We're looking at it now, but it was just something for him to keep track of his records. So in that case, you might forego, more proper, punctuation, grammar, spelling, stuff like that. So A for 6, 7, our same passage and our notes there from Jefferson. Tracy, would you read question 7?
7. What makes the format of the garden notes effective for its purpose? A. The transition between ideas highlight important information for easy access. B. Ideas are separated by headers which guide the reader to necessary information. C. Consistent numbering corresponds to steps in a process. D. Its concise entry is noted by dates, helping the reader locate information quickly. B.
D here. It's easy to reference, even though it's, the grammar and stuff's not perfect. It's very concise to the point. So, you could just very easily, sort of like a table, it's sort of like some of the other various forms, like a timeline or something like that. It eliminates a lot of the noise around it. So you only get the precise information. In this case, if that's what you're looking for, that's perfect. For his notes, if he were to write something more formal about his experimentation in his garden, he might choose, that expository style where he, poses an argument about, growing so forth and so on in, his garden and the success or failure that he had. But here, just for that data, D, it's more concise and it works well for quick notes. 7's D. 8, Grace, would you read question 8?
Okay. Which perspective do the article and garden notes share? A. Note taking is essential to growing a successful garden. B. Gardening, although rewarding, is challenging and presents failure as well as success. C. Experimenting with exotic crops can be both exciting and frustrating. And D. Adding useful plants to one's culture is a service to humankind. A.
So
or B?
B.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, that's expressed really well in both situations, right? Because we see his failures in the notes that he takes, and we see that expressed in the writing as well. So, and the other ones, not necessarily referenced in both, or, like D, that's more of an argument that he's making that we should all add a plant to, one's culture as a service to mankind. That's a point that he's making. So 8 is B. 9, we still got the same stuff. 9, Sasha Gay, would you read 9 for us, please?
How do the two texts differ in purpose? A. The article entertains the details about Jefferson's garden, but the notes explain how to keep a garden. B. The article explores why Jefferson was a successful gardener, but the notes merely list his successes. C. The article informs readers about Jefferson's experiments in gardening, but the notes list his observation. And D, the article explains the challenges of gardening, but the notes show that Jefferson enjoyed tending his garden. Is it D
It's
or
C.
C?
Yeah, C. Right, because it article tells us a lot about his experimentation, but we actually see, you know, what he observed in his garden with the notes. And then the other ones, of course, you know, B doesn't really say why he was a successful gardener. It just points out that he was an experimental gardener. And the notes list both his successes and failures. In A, the article entertains with details about Jefferson's garden, but the notes explain how to keep a garden. There's not really things about keeping a garden in those notes. It's more about just, you know, observations of what was happening. So leave C there for us for number 9. 10, we got our passage here again. Nilda, would you mind reading number 10?
Yes, how do the article and the garden notes different in an audience? The article for a general audience, but the garden notes were for Jefferson's own use. B, the article is for visitors to Jefferson's garden, but the garden notes are for a general audience. C, the article is for gardeners, but the garden notes are for historians. D, the article is for the new experimental gardeners, but the garden notes are for people who want to follow Jefferson methods. C.
So A, article is for, you know, general audience, right? It's information for everybody. The notes, though, were just for him. I'd have to see, he may have published or written something more formal about his gardening, but, you know, those were just for his purpose. So, you know, that's what happens when you know, become a historical figure. Then everybody goes through all the stuff that was not necessarily meant to be seen if you leave that behind, right? So in this case, we get to see his gardening notes. So 10 is A. And then 11, last one. How about Tracy, would you read number 11 for us?
On the basis of the information in both texts, the most logical conclusion to draw about Thomas Jefferson is that he A. had a great idea of leisure time, B. was organized, patient, and an avid learner, C. preferred garden to be in around others, D. were a keen observer but impractical. B.
B, yeah, he shows, you know, because he was keeping these notes, he was organized. It definitely, because of all of the things that he was involved in, architecture and, you know, science and everything else, you know, he was definitely an avid and a lifetime learner, you know, which I think we should all strive to be. We should continue to, you know, challenge ourselves and continue to learn all through life. But yeah, so, and it doesn't seem like a man that had much leisure time, you know, because we know of all of his exploits. So B leaves B for us as a boy for 11. And that's the last one. Do I need to follow up with any of those answers?
Number 3.
Number 3, representative, REPRSENTATIVE. I'll pull it up here.
I want to know whether the two it should be figure or in words.
What?
So the two, because sometimes if you write figure, they'll give you
yeah
wrong. Yeah.
Wait, for two? For number two?
No, number 3.
Oh, number
If you-
3. Okay.
Yeah. Two
Oh,
parts.
Okay. So you have to spell it out, right?
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah. So representative and then TWO for the second blank, representative and 2. Right. Any others there? All right. I'm going to take that as a no. Yeah. Nilda's got that in the chat there spelled out correctly for us. All right. And so I'm going to stop my share. This is more, ideas of comparing and contrasting different information. And obviously, this idea that some things work better in some formats than others. And that really is what we got today. If you're writing for yourself, yeah, you don't need to get that formal, right? If you keep it like a journal or something, you don't have to worry about spelling, you don't have to worry about grammar, punctuation, all of that. If you're writing for an audience, you're going to take that into account. And then what are you telling your audience? So that is all just thinking more about the audience and the purpose of your writing, right? So what ideas are you trying to express and what form is going to be best for that? And you're going to see that, on your exam. So you want to think about those things. Well, why was this written in the way it was? What was the purpose? Who was the audience? Keep asking yourself those questions and always take into account, titles of passages and things. Okay, so any questions on language arts then? Okay, so with that, we're finishing up today. Social studies, we're barreling down, looking at the end here. So tomorrow we'll be, closing in on the end of that unit. Okay, I'll see you tomorrow.
All right.
Bye-bye.